Welcome back to another episode of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast. Joining me today is Sydney Milani. Sydney is a US Bobsled athlete and just an overall incredible person. Today, we're going to dive into her journey as to how she got to the bobsled, her background in track and field, the book that she recently wrote, her training, her recovery strategies, and so much more. I always enjoy talking with Sydney, and I think she's just an overall incredible person. Episodes like this are made possible by ISOFIT. ISOFIT is the official sponsor for season 5 of the podcast. Enjoy. Sydney, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with you today. Thank you so much for being here. For people who maybe aren't familiar with you or haven't heard about all the amazing things that you do in the world of bobsled or the world of track and field previously, would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and all the great things that I feel like you're doing all the time?
My name is Sydney Milani, and I grew up in Iowa and went on to run track at the University of Alabama, where I had a really great experience, and it was definitely the catalyst to my professional career on Team USA bobsled. So we are pursuing my first Olympics hopefully in 2026, and hopefully a few more after that. And currently working on a bunch of different projects, one being the training journal that I just published. So.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. And it's interesting because I feel like you go by athlete, but you wear so many different hats and you know so many different things. You really come from a very diverse, broad skill set that way. And one hand, I know that you're very well versed in the world of strength and conditioning and human performance, and obviously recovery as well. I know very few people that are able to train the amount that you do day in and day out and still, look and feel nearly 100% all of the time. And on top of that, the writing work that you're doing and all the other work that you're doing that way as well is really unparalleled in my opinion. So I really applaud you for being able to do pretty much everything all the time that way. How were you able to like juggle all these different things, or where did this kind of ability to do all the things all the time come from? Was that something that you kind of like grew up doing, or did we just kind of like fall into this position?
Oh, well, thanks, Dan. No, I think professional athletes, especially in the Team USA setting, who don't have professional contracts like a lot of the track kids do, like Nike and Adidas and everything, on the pure Olympic sports side, that's kind of something you are forced to do. I feel like a lot of times you accumulate skills when you are put into uncomfortable situations and oftentimes situations that you're not quite prepared for per se, but we don't get paid a lot. And so if you don't problem solve, you're not going to make it. So the way, I juggle all these projects and I think it comes a lot from my dad being the innovator that he is and growing up on a farm and working real well with my hands and then also being able to problem solve and watching him problem solve growing up was quite the learning experience. So I think it just comes from nurture and then, nature of the Team USA setting and having to figure these things out.
Yeah, you brought up such an interesting point. You mean to tell me that the majority of the athletes are not rewarded with like $1 million contracts to represent their country? Like that's not the standard?
No, absolutely not. I think that's a really that's an angle of Olympic sports that people don't really realize. I get all the time people are telling me, "Oh, you must be so set up like being on Team USA." And it's like, "No, we do not get paid." And it's very dependent on the sport, like more niche sports like bobsled obviously bring in a little bit less funding than the big core sports like track and field. And so we don't get paid. We might get a little stipend, but it's not taken us very far. And we are actually the most competitive country in the world, hands down, but we get paid out the least for our medals. So it's tough.
That's really interesting, especially because I feel like financial motives have a strong tendency to drive people, for better or for worse that way. I guess, and the other side of that coin, though, it really speaks volumes to you as a person in the sense that you are putting in so much time day in and day out, chasing a dream and a goal that you've probably set for years that way and doing all of that just out of your passion and love for your country and your ability to represent the country on an international stage that way. And I think that there's something to be said about that, the ability to kind of chase a goal and pursue a goal that a lot of people probably thought was crazy, even when there's not that financial reward at the end. Is I think that a lot of times people will put a lot of effort and energy into things, and they'll be disappointed when they're not compensated monetarily for their work that way. But a lot of times I've found it, maybe this is my own personal experience, the things that don't always pay the least, but I put the most amount of time into, have actually been the most rewarding for me to do. And that's why I like to pursue them. Is there's something really, really valuable that comes, in my opinion, when we just focus on all the things other than money. Not to say money's not important, but I feel like you really find out who you are when we're not in it for the money, but we're actually in it for what I would consider more the quote unquote right reason, if you will.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, Team USA has athletes working multiple jobs. I have teammates living out of their cars because they can't afford to live while they train full time. But there's definitely a certain beauty to that. It's unfortunate and I think it needs to change. But, when you see Olympian or when you see someone wearing the rings, or even if they haven't been to the Olympics yet, but they're on Team USA, like that comes with sacrifice. And that's part of the attraction to the sport. That's what brings in viewers. That's what brings in diehard fans, is because athletes are valued in that sense. Like we just have something more to us that I mean, athletes are just built different. Like we have that passion, we have that drive, and that's also why we're so valued, like in the workspace and stuff like that, post college athletics and post professional career, because we were able to do things that would defeat lesser people.
You are definitely built different, Sydney. I love that. And as you were talking, I couldn't help but wonder, for the people who don't know you as well, they're probably going to hear bobsledder and Virginia Beach, and they're going to have a few questions in mind. Like, how does someone train for bobsled, which is like a winter sport, when they're living in like a coastal beach town that way? So I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about what your kind of training routine looks like on the day to day that way, whether that's the strength work that you do, the power work that you do, the sled work that you do. How do you make all of these things happen when you're not necessarily like up in like the mountains or the cold, snowy areas, for lack of a better way to put it?
Yeah, I think that definitely was added to the list of problem solving when I moved here. But when I graduated from the University of Alabama, I came to Virginia Beach for a job with Virginia High Performance, VHP. And that is a multimodality program that prepares naval special warfare operators for their next steps in life. And I went to school for strength and conditioning. That's something I was really passionate about. That's something I watched my dad be really successful in as I was growing up. And so that job brought me here to Virginia Beach, where I was a strength coach for that program. And it was amazing. I'm currently not working there anymore because I just decided to train full time, which they were super supportive about, which is awesome. But yeah, that definitely came with its challenges. And that goes with the many projects that I, was working on. And I actually got in contact with Sorenex and Bert Soren, who is the owner. And, he was extremely generous in being really passionate about my pursuit because he also pursued the Olympics, so he knows the struggle. And he decided to build me a sled. And so I was able to train dry land with a bobsled, like here in Virginia Beach, which has been an absolute game changer. A lot of athletes, actually no athlete, because he only built one. There's only one in existence. No athlete like has that commodity, which is amazing, and I'm very thankful for that. So that was one problem that I was able to solve is I have the sled here in Virginia Beach that I can practice my hits on, practice running behind and all that fun stuff. It's definitely not the same as being on the ice, but it gets the job done. And I would say a typical training day for me, I always start with my track work. So I go on base, the military base here in Virginia Beach, and I go to the track there because it's just more quiet than like the high school tracks or public tracks around. And I'll sprint, I do my full warm up, I do my drills, I do some of my PT movements, and I'll push my sled if need be that day. And then after that, I'll go straight to the weight room. And my emphasis right now is the weight room, because I'm trying to gain weight. I would say that's definitely my weakness as a bobsledder is being big and strong, which is funny because when I ran track, my strength was being big and strong, and it was just my speed that I needed to work on. And now being in bobsled, my speed is my strength, and I'm just trying to get bigger and stronger. So weight room takes up a lot of my time. So I probably spend around shoot no less than 3 hours training, but keep in mind that also is rest. Like I'm not moving that entire time. It's drills, it's transportation from track to weight room. So when I say that, for the younger audience listening, don't take that and be like, oh, I need to train 3 hours a day to be an Olympian. Like that is not the case. You definitely have to dedicate your whole day to, that objective. You have to be mindful with all the decisions that you make throughout your day. But yeah, training is definitely a big demand in my daily routine. And yeah, we were able to problem solve when I came here to the beach as a bobsledder.
Yeah, no, that's so unique. And I mean, I absolutely love that Sorinex was able to outfit you so well with that sled that way. That's a huge flex. The only one in existence, and you have it. That is absolutely incredible that way. And I think it's important, as you kind of alluded to that way, to talk on the training side. I definitely see some kids these days who spend 3, 4, 5 hours a day training, and it is a very hard, all out 3, 4, 5 hours with minimal to no rest. And I think there's a point in training, and you obviously know this just with your background in performance that way. There's a point where we start to see diminishing returns, and the work that we do is not really worth the effort anymore. The quality is just not there, right? Like, obviously, when you ran track and you're very focused on speed, there comes a point where you just don't run as fast because you're tired. And it's like, well, what's the point of running if we're not running fast anymore? Like, obviously, if we're trying to run like a marathon, different story. But in relation to all the things that you do, it's very much speed and power focused. So once those qualities disappear, it kind of asks the question, like, why are we still going to train this if it's not really worthwhile? And obviously, those longer rest periods are essential for that. So, huge fan of that. Obviously, it takes up a huge chunk of your day, as you mentioned. But longer rest period, higher quality work, in my opinion, is a great transaction. I also think it's really important to kind of run back the point that you made about how strength is really the focus for you right now, and you're like getting in and getting after the weight room stuff really, really hard. Like, I mean, let's be real, you're probably stronger than I am. Like, you're built like you can move a mountain, but my like thought is like, why is that not the standard for all female athletes? Like, I still see a lot of female athletes in particular who are very scared to go into the gym, or they don't want to lift weights. And I think that there's some kind of disconnect that occurs in the female athlete world, and I don't know it or understand it that well myself, but I certainly see something going on there where I think if we bridge that gap and get the female athlete into the weight room more often, more frequently, and understand how to actually strength train, how to move some weight, and the effect that that's going to have on the body and on the performance side that way, I think that there's a lot of like intangible benefits that can come from that.
Yeah, I think a few things come to mind when you say that. Having been on this journey where I'm trying to gain weight and trying to gain size and strength and everything like that, I don't think people realize how difficult it is to actually get big and bulky and muscular. Like the weight room is so important, especially for women, especially for like hormone balance and brain health and all of that fun stuff. And you want to be able to play with your kids for a long time and hold your baby for as long as you need to. And so even if you're not going to the Olympics, like you certainly need strength training. And it's, I can understand when women especially are hesitant about that because me being on this weight gain journey, I hate every minute of it. Like I feel big, I feel bulky, I feel not I don't feel very feminine at the moment, and that's something that I kind of struggle with mentally like as I'm on this journey. So I can't understand like a woman's hesitation. But I think one, you need to ask yourself what your goals are and kind of plan from there. Like it is extremely difficult to get big and bulky, but if that's not what you want, then there are ways to train and still look very feminine, but be very capable at the same time. So bouncing off of that ideal, I think getting a coach is probably a great way to go about that. I think a lot of people go into the gym and just kind of do whatever they're kind of feeling like doing, which is fine and dandy. But if you are really concerned about it, I think getting a coach is a good idea. And yeah, I mean, shoot, girls, like being strong and capable is the way to go. Like, even though I do have a hard time like walking in front of the mirror sometimes, gaining weight, this isn't just from strength training. You're not gonna have that issue if you just strength train, but gaining weight, I still really enjoy like how diesel I feel all the time. And I think I think girls, if you participated in the weight room and were hesitant because of the body dysmorphia and worried about getting bulky and stuff like that, I think those feelings will go away when you realize all of the benefits that come with strength training. So I definitely encourage it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you brought up the importance of kind of finding and seeking out a coach that way. And I know that you work with some phenomenal people, some of the best in the business, really, when it comes to that. So, what have you found works really well from that coaching standpoint? What do you like to look for in a coach versus what things have you found based on your experience didn't really work out well or mesh well with kind of what you were after from a performance and strength training side of things?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because when I was in college, so I grew up in Iowa and then I went to Iowa State my first year and then transferred to Alabama. And having gone through the transfer process, I think I really learned what I liked and what I didn't like. And I think for me personally, my dad was the one that coached me growing up. So now when I look for a coach, I look for a coach that kind of takes on like a father figure to me almost because I'm going to compete better when I feel like I have someone to compete for because there are a lot of days where I don't want to train. There are a lot of days that I don't want to hit my calories and the motivation isn't always going to be there, but it's really hard to give up on somebody you love and somebody that you care about and believe in. So finding a coach where you trust their process is a really big deal. And but even if you're not an athlete and you don't have like that intense of a relationship with your coach, like for example, I remote coach. I remote coach like the general pop and stuff like that just to fund my Olympic endeavors. And people respond in really different ways. Like I have some clients who are like I need you to text me every day and I need you to stay on my butt and I need a little bit of tough love. And then there are coaches who or coaches, I'm sorry. Then I have athletes who respond in a more nurturing way. Like they need a little bit more they need me to be more hands off or they need me to be more mothering, if you will. And so just finding a coach who's willing to have that flexibility and kind of adapt to your coaching style and stuff like that. So yeah, it just depends on what kind of people person you are and what your coach specializes in and just finding what works for you.
Yeah, no, I like that point a lot. I think that ultimately at the end of the day, individualization is key. And I think that anymore you can kind of figure out which coaches do that versus which ones don't very, very quick. I think if you walk in and you realize like all of the exercises look like every program you've ever seen on Google searches, you're probably in the wrong spot. And by the same token, if you over individualize it to the point where every session is so drastically different. It's almost as if someone is like copying and pasting Instagram workouts and slapping it together and calling it a program. I also think that there's a little bit of, I don't want to say, I guess I want to say like that kind of stuff just doesn't really produce the results that I feel like people are after. So I certainly think finding a balance of someone who is going to meet you where you're at and individualize things is absolutely essential. And obviously, like you mentioned, you work with people online, and I think the online world has kind of made that so much easier for people to find the right person for them to work with, right? Like before, we were limited by, what time do we have free? When can we actually get someplace to meet up with someone in person and so on that way? Whereas now we can work with anyone we want, that offers the service wherever we are in the world at any time that way. And I think that that's an absolute game changer for the, athletic population that way to have access to that kind of stuff, because that was certainly not a thing 10 years ago, based on my memory anyway. So I think that's absolutely huge that way. And I guess building off of that training topic, I mentioned the term recovery before, and I feel like that's something that you really take seriously, so much so that like I was blown away by the fact that you have a freaking cold plunge just casually chilling in your house that way. Like walk me through the little Sydney Milani like recovery protocol here. How do we recover from all this high effort, high energy activity that we put in and day out?
I am big on my recovery. We have three bedrooms here in the house, and one is a spare bedroom, one is my bedroom, and then one is the recovery room, is what we like to call it. And it just has like all the Normatec boots, the cold plunge, the stationary bike, and all that fun stuff. We definitely dressed it up. Not saying you need all of that equipment for recovery, but as being an athlete since I was 2 years old, I've definitely accumulated toys. Um, but for me, I I like to do my morning recovery, and my evening recovery is like a for sure staple in my day. So for example, I'll wake up, do the cold plunge, and then right after the cold plunge, I do the stationary bike. I hate the cold plunge more than anything in the world. I stare at the water for probably 10 minutes before I get in, because I'm just trying to talk myself into it. But I get in the cold plunge, do it for a few minutes, and then get off and do the stationary bike. That way I'm just moving. Like I spent all night being still. So I like to get up and get the blood flowing. And it's kind of like me and my teammates make fun of each other because we're adult athletes now. I think every athlete, no matter what age, should, get a little movement in the morning. But we make fun of ourselves because we call it the warm up before our warm up because we're getting old now, as adult athletes. But that's kind of just something like super quick that I'll do in the morning. It only takes like 10, 15 minutes. And then, go through my day training, doing projects, working, whatever. And in the evening, I'll do my foam rolling, my stretching, my PT exercises, my Normatec boots, pretty much anything that I need to do to kind of settle down for the night. Then of course on throughout the week, like on my recovery day, active recovery day is on Wednesday. So I'll do a shorter training session, and then I'll prioritize like massage. I'll spend longer on the foam roller. I'll do more PT exercises. So definitely prioritizing that, being proactive about things like that.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like historically that's the area that a lot of athletes really neglect is they hear that whole term recovery thing and they just think, you know what, I don't need to do that, or that doesn't pertain to me or apply to me, right? Like I don't want to do that. Or like, I read online that foam rolling does nothing, so I'm just not going to do it, right? Like I feel like everyone's been there. I certainly have been there. I've gone through phases where I spend like an hour a day on recovery work and I feel amazing. And I also go through phases where I never do any of it and I feel awful all the time and I can't imagine why. But it's so enlightening to me to just hear how dialed in you are when it comes to that and how serious you take that, because I feel like in order to get to the level of competition that you're at, you don't get there by accident. You sweat the small stuff and you take everything seriously. And that includes the recovery. And like, even if some of these things only do like 0.1% of a difference, at the level you're at, that 0.1% means the difference between winning and losing. So it's like we can't leave that on the table. So I feel like making sure that we do everything we can to ensure we're always as close to 100% as we can be is absolutely essential. And obviously, I think that recovery is important just to kind of understand that the training that we do physically is not necessarily what is going to propel us forward. It's a recovery from that training that propels us forward. I've seen a lot of athletes work really, really hard and train really hard, but they never hit that recovery stimulus from that training. They sleep 4 hours a night. They don't do any kind of tissue work. They don't do anything, from a like hormonal standpoint, whether that's red light, cold plunge, whatever that way. They just kind of miss the mark on that recovery side. And it's just a shame to see how many hours of energy and effort get poured into something and then the results don't show, right? Like I feel like, at least for me, if I'm putting in the work to do something day in and day out and I'm not getting anywhere, like I just go crazy after a while. So I think that ensuring you take your recovery seriously is absolutely essential. And I love that that's such a forefront pillar for you and everything that you do that way. And I'm guessing you probably didn't like start with all the fancy bells and whistles when it comes to recovery. You probably started with like basic foam roller and some simple things, and it kind of evolved and morphed over time into what it is today.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Well, yeah. I mean, I saw an Instagram post from a Canadian athlete right after the Olympics. She had won a medal, and it was a picture of her crying, and you could just tell like that medal just meant so much to her. And her caption was like, "Oh, so you want to go to the Olympics? Well, are you willing to do the same thing every single day and, go through your entire day doing boring foam rolling and training and pushing your body to the limits and then doing it all over again the next day? Like, are you willing to do that?" And it's just like, some athletes can scrape by without doing their recovery. I've seen it. But this is also why a lot of athletes don't make it. I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat it. Very few people go on to do college athletics, let alone be on an Olympic team. And if you're not willing to be routine, if you're not willing to be strict and sweat the small stuff, like you said, then you're not going to make it. And you know what? Even if foam rolling, let's say it doesn't work, like there is validity in placebo. And if it's going to make you feel good, then you should probably do it because your body is trying to tell you something. So yeah, there's definitely all kinds of conflicting opinions and conflicting research, but at the end of the day, you need to find what works for you. You need to find what makes you feel good, and you need to prioritize it. Otherwise, you're not going to make it.
You bring up such an interesting point in that unfortunately not every athlete is going to quote unquote make it. Maybe they don't make it to college, maybe they don't make it professionally, whatever it is that way. And I feel like it's such a difficult conversation to have with people. So what kind of things have you learned from your experience that make you feel like you're going to make it, that make you feel like, you know what, I know I'm going to succeed? And then what kind of strategies do you feel like set other athletes apart in their ability to succeed or not succeed when it comes to their, career in sport that way?
Oh, that's a loaded question, I feel like. Shoot.
I always ask loaded questions.
Um, I mean, there's no guarantee I'm going to make the Olympics. No guarantee at all. It's a huge risk to try and do something like that. I mean, you're so attached emotionally to the sport and you literally put everything on the line. Like, I don't make any money, working multiple jobs to make it work. I'm missing out on a really stable work environment. I'm missing out on a stable home life because, like being a professional athlete and making it to the Olympics, it's definitely not accommodating for family life. It's definitely not accommodating to have a spouse. People make it work, but it's not ideal. And so there's all these things that you miss out on, and it's a gamble, it's a risk because people train 4 years, I mean, their whole lives, but we kind of measure our lives in quads at this point. And so we train 4 years for one thing. And if you don't make it, it's devastating. And I see it every Olympics, whether it's my sport or not. So there's no guarantee that you're going to quote unquote make it. But you gotta bet on yourself. And I think my thing has always been when you step on the line, like you need to have every confidence that like you're gonna win this race. And that happens by making sure that your process is golden. For example, like when you're every day you're making decisions like, do I go train? Do I not go train? Okay. What's gonna help that? What's gonna make that process golden? Going to train. Do I want to eat this ice cream or do I want to eat this protein shake, for example? I don't know. Eat the protein shake. Like I always tell people you have to make every decision black and white. Is this going to help you to the Olympics or is it not? And if it's not, get rid of it. And sometimes it's hard to make decisions black and white, but that's simply what you have to do. That's the burden that athletes bear when they're trying to achieve something so risky. So I would say for athletes trying to do the same thing, like make decisions black and white, it's going to be really difficult. There's going to be a lot of pros and cons lists being made. But you have to make the black and white decisions. You have to be willing to live a really routine life because consistency is key. And you have to be able to see past people who won't believe in you because I was told multiple times, like, don't quit your job at VHP. Like, stay, make money. I was told multiple times, accepting my role on Team USA wasn't smart. You're never going to make it to the Olympics, like all these things. You really have to bet on yourself, and then you have to have strong relationships that are going to push you on the days that you can't push yourself, because I think those strong relationships are going to get you by a lot of hard times that you wouldn't be able to otherwise.
Yeah.
So,
And I feel like you need to take that leap of faith. You need to place that bet on yourself. You need to jump off the metaphorical cliff and jump all in full-fledged and never look back. And I feel like if you don't make that leap, if you don't make that transaction, you're never going to actually know if you're going to be successful or not because you don't give it all you have, right? Like, yeah, sure, we could still train and we could still possibly be on the team, but hey, we're going to work 30 to 40 hours elsewhere. It's like that's going to detract from the training and we're not going to give the main thing all of our effort. So if we're not giving that all of our effort, we never know if we're going to hit the level that we could have, right? Like you have to really go all in on things, in my opinion. And it's definitely a difficult transaction to make. And I'm sure, as you mentioned, you definitely got a lot of pushback and, a lot of people had opinions that way. And I feel like, unfortunately, most people are not going to understand this unless they're within that world themselves, unless they've been in a similar position, unless they walk the walk and not just talk the talk, so to speak, right? Like until you understand just how rare of an opportunity this is, and until you realize that you've gone years and years and years waiting for anything remotely close to this to come up, and now it's right here, like I don't think you really have like much of a leg to stand on when it comes to the opinion here, right? Like until you get in the situation yourself, you don't understand it. And I think that the other piece that you mentioned about doing a lot of boring things repeatedly and how it's a little tedious at times, it's a little bit monotonous, but this is what it takes to be successful. And earlier you talked about the individualization that it takes to be successful as well, right? Your individualized training, your individualized recovery, all these different things that way. And I feel like it's essential to just have some sort of like personalized roadmap to success, if you will. And I think when we started talking, you mentioned that you published a training journal, which I think does exactly that thing that I just kind of laid out that way, that thing that I just explained. So walk me through what the training journal is, where the inspiration for that came from, and how it kind of solves this issue of athlete training and logging and all the different things that we've discussed so far today, Sydney.
yeah. So I started journaling at a super young age. I watched my dad do it. And so I started doing it, and I started doing it really seriously in high school, where just tracking all my workouts, writing a little daily excerpt or something like that, talking about how I felt during training, writing down the weight that I used in the weight room and the splits from all my reps on the track and all of that fun stuff. And, it just progressed throughout the years. And going through high school, going through college, and now being 24 and pursuing the Olympics, I was spending so much time with my like just blank piece of paper journal, because I was really picky about my boxes and the colors and, all of that fun stuff. So I was sitting down every night, like just drawing up all of this in my journal from scratch for like an hour. And I didn't mind spending that much time with my journal. But I got to a point where I was like, I really wish there was just a journal exactly how I like it, like already set up, so I didn't have to do this. I could just fill it in. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna make one. So I'm definitely no artist or author, anything like that, but I managed to scrum up a little bit of a training journal that kind of replicates my own. And now I use the training journal that I've published myself, and it's detailed. It's the first draft, so I definitely plan on adding more to it. But when you first open it, there's, write down your name, write down your sport, and then write down what season you're in. So in the past with all my journals, so I knew which one I wanted to grab in case I wanted to look back. I labeled my journals. So for example, you could do something super simple like 23-24 season. Or you could do something like what I did. I wrote down like my season of life. So, for example, like COVID training journal or freshman year at Alabama training journal, like things like that. And then on the page right next to it, there's an opportunity for you to drop a mind map. So it's going to say reasons right in the middle of the page. And for me, like I have a lot of reasons that I do what I do. So I don't want to sit there and journal all of them. Although that might be good. What I like to do more than anything is just mind map things. So I'll circle the reasons in the middle and then I'll, branch out like dad, family, legacy, all of that fun stuff and just keep adding to it as I go and accumulate more reasons to be successful. And you'll turn the page and I work off of an annual plan. I think all athletes should work off of an annual plan. It's just an opportunity for you to map out your training for an entire year, make sure you know when all your competitions are, when all your holidays are, when all your rest weeks are, everything. And if your coach, strength coach, track coach, regular coach, or anything is doing that, then you are heading in a strategic direction. If you're just kind of accumulating programs like a little bit on the fly, that might get you by, but the big picture like isn't there. And so the annual plan is just an opportunity for you to see the big picture and for you to see your training as it should progress throughout a year. And even if you're not an athlete and you're just using the training journal for general population type needs, I tell my clients who I work with remotely, like you're not going to have competitions that you necessarily are planning for, but how about you write in where I would write in my competition schedule, like goals that you want to hit throughout the year. Maybe you're trying to lose weight and you want to be this weight at this time of the year, or maybe you want to train for a marathon and this is when you want to be ready for it, things like that. So the annual plan is definitely one of my favorite features of it. And then when you get into the actual like journaling part, you're going to have week overviews of training, recovery, and nutrition. And then you're going to get those week overviews split up into days, and you're going to have sections and opportunities to write down, your just regular journaling notes and your workouts, and it has graphs and everything that you can fill in. So I definitely got detailed with it, but I think it makes sense to me. And I hope that other people get good use out of it too.
Yeah, definitely. I love that kind of outline, and I love the importance of, as you mentioned, having a plan for each year that way, because you're right. I think it's so easy to get caught up and just kind of figure it out as you go. And I mean, I'm certainly guilty of that myself. I didn't always have a plan for what my year was going to bring me. And I find if you don't have a plan for yourself, you become a part of someone else's plan. And that doesn't really work well in the world of sport and high performance and athletics that way. I really think you have to have some kind of clear goals and intentions lined out for your year. And then I also like how, as you mentioned, you kind of break it down by week kind of basis in the journal that way. So we have the big picture view, but we also have the kind of zoomed in micro view, if you will. And I think the mind mapping is really interesting. That's not something that I've been overly good with myself that way, but I keep hearing that come up over and over and over again and how valuable it is for people. So I certainly think that taking the time to actually being able to like sit there with your thoughts and kind of organize some of the different things that you are going through on the day to day or week to week that way is really helpful. And the other piece, I think that this makes a really good thing to be able to look back on, right? Like you're literally documenting your journey in the moment, understanding how you got to where you get to at the end of it, right? Like it's really, really powerful and impactful to look back at something like that, be able to share it with other people that way and kind of almost like decode how you became successful, if you will. And the other piece earlier you mentioned about the mental health side with athletes that way. I am not a mental health professional by any means, but I do think that there could be some potential value to this kind of process of journaling and self-reflection that way as it relates to the mental health for the athlete that way as well.
Yeah, I think the journal is just an opportunity for you to be intentional about everything you're doing. I think it's so easy to be on autopilot nowadays, especially with social media and phones. And this is just an opportunity for you to sit down with your training and your process and either debrief on the day or get ready for the next. And those are things that you need to be willing to do as an athlete because for example, when I went through the transfer process going from Iowa State to Alabama, something that really helped my coach integrate me into the Alabama program is he had all of my training from high school and college because I wrote it down, I documented it. And if we would have wasted time, experimenting with training that I might respond to, I might not have had as good of a time as I did. And so things like this are important, and not only because of training and looking back at how you got to where you are and stuff like that, but it's also, your journals are kind of your legacy. My dad gave me a couple of his journals, and that inspired me as an athlete and was one of the reasons that I fell in love with sports. He was a wrestler, and I think, I save all my journals because I want to be able to give them to my kids one day. And I think things like that are just a really good opportunity for you to learn yourself better and kind of plan where you want to go. And like I said, being intentional about yourself and by extension, the people around you, because you're going to be a better partner, person, friend, everything if you are pursuing your goals properly.
And with that in mind, your goals and your future and all that way, obviously we talked about the big goal for 2026 for you, but is there anything else on the horizon for you in the future here, Sydney?
Shoot, we have a lot of things in the work. A lot of things that I can't talk about yet, but my kind of 10-year plan is to go to the Olympics here in 2026 is hopefully my first, and then two more Olympics after that. So the 2030 Olympics and then our home Olympics in 2034.
That would be absolutely incredible. And you're right. I certainly think that there's a lot of other exciting stuff going on behind the scenes that way. And I cannot wait for that stuff to kind of come to the forefront, if you will, and obviously get to a point where we can share that sort of thing a little bit more publicly with people that way. There's certainly a lot on the horizon and a lot to look forward to, but we could probably talk about you all day long because you're just so wonderful, Sydney. For people who want to, is there anything that we missed as we were chatting, or anything else that you really wanted to bring up and make sure people took away from your journey that way?
I don't know. I think we covered a lot of really good things. And if anyone have had any questions, just please feel free to reach out and I can kind of help guide or answer any questions in a more one-on-one setting. And yeah, no, I really appreciate you. I love being on the podcast with you. I think you're an incredibly hard worker and successful guy. So
I don't know about that.
then talk
Definitely
about
not the
me. What about
successful
you,
part,
Dan?
but I was going to say, I don't know if anyone quite compares to you here, Sydney, but for people who want to find out more about you, where can they find you at online that way? I know you're kind of like me, where we grew up in the MySpace generation. I still have my account. I don't know about you, but where can people find more about you online that way?
I'm on Instagram and I'm public, so I try to check my DMs often. That's a really good way to reach out to me. If you're looking for, I mean, yeah, I would say Instagram because I would say just ask Dan for my number or something, but I don't want no crazies to be getting my number. So
Maybe if you're like a CEO of a major company and you have a few, if you have a few $1,000s that you want to like donate to a good cause, happy to give you
yeah.
Sydney's number and possibly Venmo information.
That would be great. One thing that I will tell you about that's in the works is I'm currently getting my 501(c)(3 so I can be a nonprofit organization. And the goal is to hopefully provide opportunities for people to come and I'm trying not to give anything away and do certain tasks with Olympic athletes on an internship. And the 501(c)(3 would hopefully pay their way on tour and everything with us. And yeah, so if you want to be part of it and donate, I'll give you a tax write-off.
We all need more of those lately, so that's awesome. We'll link to all of that in the description below. That way, if you didn't quite catch that, you can just click there. Sydney, this was amazing, and as always, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for everything.
No, thank you, Dan. I appreciate it.